Porter Airlines is beginning service to Eastern Canada. An airline advocacy group is suing the Canadian government, and WestJet strikes a deal to avoid the strike. Let's talk about it today on episode 6 of Just Plain Fun. Well, welcome to episode 6 of the Just Plain Fun podcast. I'm your host, Hunter, today. Hope everyone's having a great Friday so far, and that you're going to be able to enjoy the long weekend here if you're in Canada. Should be really, really fun. Obviously, a little bit of fun news to dive into today, so I'm really excited about that. Definitely a little bit happier than our latest episode that we did, the WestJet strike 72-hour notice episode. But let's talk about that a little bit later. I want to start off with some really good news for Eastern Canadians in the Atlantic provinces, and even all Canadians who want to travel out to the Atlantic provinces. And that is that Porter Airlines is inaugurating flights right now between Ottawa International and Charlottetown Airport. They're going to be confirming their plans right now to actually service that year-round, that entire route. And so with Porter now going to Prince Edward Island, which is one of the provinces here in Canada, the airline now flies to all Atlantic provinces for the first time. So they really have always been a brand that focuses on their commitment to building, their presence in Eastern Canada. And this step for sure in their announcement of this is absolutely another step in that direction. They are definitely showing people that they really are wanting to make service out there a lot more affordable for Eastern Canadians. I will mention on that note as well that they're actually the only airline offering year-round daily non-stop service between Charlottetown and Ottawa right now. The direct service begins right now. They're going to have about 11 weekly flights, and that's going to go to 14 with the summer peak season, and then at the end of October they're probably going to dial that back to just the once daily service throughout the winter. And one other thing, not only for going out to Eastern Canada, but coming to Ottawa, not only is it a really good connecting point for travelers making their way to and from Prince Edward Island, but it's also a major tourist spot for many Canadians. Obviously, that's where the federal government is, and so oftentimes, that'd be similar to the United States with their Washington, D.C. That is kind of our Ottawa. But not only that, people also like to talk about Charlottetown, given that was where the country of Canada was officially founded, if you want to call it that. And so I think that Porter's going to have a really nice angle to play here when it comes to capitalizing on the tourism market. Obviously, anytime in marketing or within the aviation space, if you can sell yourself as something more than just a transportation company, that's what people are really looking for. They're looking for that connection piece. And if you look at, any news articles or social media, etc., from Eastern Canadians, typically they've felt quite left out in terms of the aviation space, and I think that there is for sure some merit to that argument, but this will definitely change that. And so with that, obviously there's going to be these daily flights. The plane that they'll be flying is going to be their de Havilland Dash 8 aircraft with 78 seats. But Porter also, their brand selling feature, if you want to call it that, is they offer hospitality and what they call an elevated service, including your selection of premium snacks, as well as free beer and wine served in glassware. So that's kind of their big selling features. It's going to be really interesting to see how Prince Edward Island and Eastern Canada, reacts to this. There's been a lot of press coverage on it. I'll link obviously lots of those articles down below so you can check them out if that's something you're interested in, but definitely again some really exciting news for the future there. Moving on to the second story now, and that is that there's an advocacy group in Canada called Free to Fly. It's currently in the midst right now of a class action lawsuit against the Canadian government over the mandates that were in place for all flight crew during the last couple of years up until last fall. So the applicants for the lawsuit, they're former Air Canada pilot Greg Hill, former WestJet flight attendant Tanya Lewis, and former Air Canada station attendant Brent Warren. So basically the lawsuit is for anybody who was an employee that was terminated or put into early retirement or suspended without pay, etc., for not complying with the vaccination mandate at the time back in 2021. So the applicants right now, they're kind of in this lawsuit alleging that the conduct of the Canadian government was unjustified, unlawful. You get the point there. And due to their relationship, they've now suffered damages due to the fact that they weren't able to fly commercially, and typically that's what that individual is trained specifically for. They also bring up that by requiring applicants to disclose private medical information to employers, they plead a reasonable person would regard this intrusion as offensive and, cause some distress, humiliation, you name it, is kind of their main point in the lawsuit here. But it also discusses kind of the mental and emotional distress by this inappropriate behavior. It mentions that in the filing towards the end. But I think that the mandate, of vaccination and et cetera, of the policies by the government at the time are going to be debated, in the aviation sector for quite some time, not only in aviation, in politics, in most industries, I would even argue. But I would propose that, no matter what side a person thinks was or is right in this specific case, I think there's no denying the fact that it didn't help the uncertainty and job shortages in the industry. Obviously, before the mandates even came in, there was already a pilot shortage looming, and this policy with the forced retirement or suspension of pilots and first officers and flight attendants, etc., certainly I don't think helped that. And so there's obviously more than just the mandates that cause that. I understand that it's other governmental policies. It's the cost of flight training. There are many factors for sure that need to be considered. But obviously, like I'm saying, I think that, we need to really take a wide view at this point here and go, well, in the future, if there was to be something similar or, when just debating whether it was right or wrong, I think that's a point we need to keep at the forefront, is really what it did to the pilot shortage and therefore to the cost of air travel here in Canada. Obviously, back on episode 1 and 2, we kind of went into a deep dive of the cost of air travel in Canada compared to the rest of the developed world, in the United States in particular, since they are the closest neighbor. But yeah, obviously, if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out those previous episodes, but I think that's always, like I said, something we need to keep top of mind. Moving into the final, and I would argue most exciting story for, I think, a lot of Canadian aviation enthusiasts and as well just travelers, pilots, etc., is the fact that in the late hours of the night yesterday, so that was Thursday, the 18th of May, WestJet came to an agreement to avoid the pilot strike. So this therefore meant the return to planned routes as soon as possible. And just looking at some of the videos with the CEOs and with the union leaders and with politicians, there was certainly a lot of optimism, I would say, about the fact that they were able to come to this deal and avoid the strike. But that doesn't, negate the fact that hundreds of the carriers' Thursday and Friday flights were already canceled. As of Friday afternoon, WestJet canceled 107 flights, or 29% of those scheduled for the day, and the vast majority were out of Calgary or Toronto, with affected routes ranging from London to Las Vegas, Phoenix, Saskatoon, you name it. There were a lot of canceled routes, a lot of affected people. On terms of the subsidiary, which was Swoop, which was also facing obviously this imminent strike, they canceled 67% of their flights scheduled for Thursday and Friday. But in his statement, the CEO did mention that the company is now ramping up operations as quickly and efficiently as possible. However, the full resumption of operations will take time, and so they are still recommending that you check out the website of the airport you're flying out of before you go. Check your WestJet app to make sure your flight isn't delayed or canceled before you go. But they are for sure hoping to really get back to the speed as fast as possible, given the fact that it is now the May long weekend, and so people are really hoping to be able to travel, and WestJet obviously is wanting those dollars in their pocket, and I think rightfully so. There are, one more thing that I'll mention here. Many different stories you can find online or in articles about people missing bachelor parties, weddings, etc., due to the cancellations that had already taken place. Some of the people that obviously planned their trips for months in advance were now missing them. And I did actually have several people reach out to me on Twitter in the midst of everything going on. It was great to hear your stories. Really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed talking to you, each and every one of you. It was a lot of fun. But certainly, I dealt with talking with a lot of people missing some very important events and trips that had been planned for months or weeks of stuff that had come up. One story that I will share, I think just so that people can kind of understand actually the large impact that this did have on travelers, and the reason why I think a lot of people are still going to turn their backs on WestJet now and look to other airlines in the future. Is I was chatting with Greg on Twitter and I asked him if I could share the story, and he said absolutely. I won't obviously mention his last name for privacy, but he was from Ontario, and he was planning to fly out to Calgary to attend the prayer service yesterday evening for his dad, who very sadly passed away. But with the strike looming, his flight actually was canceled. And so when he got to the airport, they said, no, sorry, no can do. We can't do much for you. And so obviously he was missing a very, very important piece of his dad's funeral that he was really hoping to get to. And so, after some going back and forth, I did reach out to him again, knowing that the funeral was today at 10 a.m. And I just sort of was, asking if everything worked out okay, if he was able to make it into Calgary. And he said he was able to rebook with Air Canada for an overnight flight. So he took a red-eye flight there, but he was able to attend his dad's funeral today. So again, my sincere condolences and prayers go to your family there, Greg. But I am so glad to know that you were able to make it today, and hope everything went well for you. With that said, though, it looks like that is about all the time that we have for today's podcast. I want to thank you again for listening to this episode of Just Plain Fun. Hey, if you want to find me on Twitter, you can reach out to me. I'm at JustPlainFun380. I love hearing your messages, love getting your feedback. It's so much fun interacting with all of you. You can also find me on YouTube. I'm Just Plain Fun A380 on there. So be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app player so that you never miss a future episode. It was great talking to everyone again. We will talk to you very, very soon. Have a great day and have a great long weekend, everyone. All right, bye-bye.